So, citations to you, Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis. How have you been doing recently? We haven't spoken since I last played with you, what, 15 years ago? It's about time we got together and caught up. Remember all the great times we used to have back in the day?
Oh yeah, you used to love playing me. Ain't I just the best?
You certainly are. Did you always have those tattoos?
Sure did, buddy. What? You never noticed them before?
No. Citations gaming enthusiasts, George Maynard here. Welcome to the second video in my Mario vs Donkey Kong review series. If you haven't seen my review of the first game yet, then here's a link in case you fancy watching it. March of the Minis is a bit of an infamous turning point in the Mario vs Donkey Kong series. After just one game, two if you want to count Donkey Kong 94 I suppose, they got rid of the style of gameplay where you play as Mario and do platforming. Honestly, they should have just rebranded it to Mini Mario's vs Donkey Kong from this point. This was a move that I think put many people off the series, as it plays nothing like the first game, and what it replaced that gameplay with plays a bit awkwardly. As a kid who unquestionably loved anything and everything Mario though, I loved this game growing up. I loved spending ages getting every gold star, and I also loved spending yet more ages making a whole load of my own levels in the construction zone. I even had a pair of Mario vs Donkey Kong 2 pajamas. Unfortunately, the top half got thrown away ages ago and I can't find any pictures of it online, but it had a Mini Mario on it and the words, "Wind me up at your peril." Sadly, I can't show you how many gold stars I got or show you any of the levels I made as a kid because I lost my childhood copy of the game. So what I played through just before writing this script was a replacement copy. I also bought a new Chonko-matic to give my playthrough a nostalgic feel. So, did this once beloved childhood game of mine hold up? No, it didn't. You changed, man.
Oi, I'm the same game I always was. If you think differently of me now, it's you what done changed.
Oh, wow. That's depressing. Alas, I didn't enjoy this game anywhere near as much as I did back in the day. Does this mean I'm more critical of games than my kid self? Yes, I'd say so. Does this mean I'm a less patient gamer than I used to be? Honestly, probably. It's sad to return to an experience you once enjoyed as a child, but can no longer feel the joy it once brought you. But hey, it's just part of growing up. Naturally, your tastes change. And not just in an I like salad now kind of way. Let's get into the review. Let's begin with the story, just to get it out of the way. Just like with the rest of this series, March of the Minis isn't all that bothered about telling a story. The most interesting thing that it did was bring Pauline into the modern era. I thought this was her first appearance in an actual new game since the original Donkey Kong, and I was all ready to praise this game's significance for that on account of her current popularity in recent games, but it turns out that she was in Donkey Kong 94 as well, apparently. And that was the first game where she sports her modern design. Well, in the artwork at least. What else stands out about this game's story? Let's see. The opening cutscene with all the toads was what came to my mind when we saw a similar crowd in the movie. It introduced a few new mini toys, though they only get brief appearances in cutscenes and are only playable in the construction zone, which is pretty lame. Yeah, this game's story adds very little of value to the overall experience. The cutscenes look very nice, few though they may be, though I suppose that's more a thing to be discussed in the visuals part of the review. Honestly, the story of the first game was much better, adding to my enjoyment with a handful of funny and cool moments throughout the game. Even these little post-boss graphics are better than the ones March of the Minis have. The story here is lackluster, which isn't a bad thing per se, and it doesn't detract from my enjoyment, but it's quite lacking even compared to the already bare-bones plot of the first game. So I'm afraid I'll have to give it 2 stars out of 6, the naff part of my scale. The visuals of this game are nothing special, with the exception of the aforementioned cutscenes, which are honestly really good looking for DS graphics and look super cinematic. These opening ones used to get me super excited to play the game, but non-cutscene DK honestly looks kinda ugly, and I hate these weird flat monkey thwomp things. The backgrounds are kind of intentionally underwhelming, since the premise of this game is that it's set in some kind of theme park building, and the backgrounds aren't real places, they're literally just walls. Like, you can see the bricks. A few of these backgrounds still look rather nice, Pipeworks being the standout. And a couple of the special kit backgrounds look very pleasant, but that's an optional part of the game that doesn't appeal to everyone. Since virtually every entity in this game is some kind of toy, the character animations in March of the Minis is mostly very stiff. For instance, the game's box portrays the Minis walking like this, but in the actual game they awkwardly shuffle along like this. Last time I did a miniature review of each world's background, but these ones are mostly so unnoteworthy that I'm not sure I have anything to say about them. But alright, here's my thoughts on each world's background in 5 words or less. Moderately pleasant. Ice shines bright, but tacky. Unique and orange? George-like. Oh wow, a sewer. Drab. At least there's no lungs. Worse spooky house. Banana. Fake city. But orange. Nice. Those certainly are metal panels. Pretty sunset. What a boring looking castle. Sunbeams. Nice touch. I can't help but compare this game to the first one, and regarding their visuals, I think these two games were aiming to accomplish different things. The first game did something bold for the system it's on, doing a decent job at pre-rendered graphics on a primitive system, giving us some great backgrounds, and put in the effort to give us some really charming animations. It aimed high and hit the mark more often than not. Whereas March of the Minis aims to provide decent, middle-of-the-road graphics, and succeeds at doing so. So, I'm giving it a 3 out of 6 for visuals. The music in March of the Minis is the thing I enjoyed most about the game when I played through it recently. The OST is still fairly average, but it's often funky and always at least enjoyable. I really like how each world's level selection screen has its own variation of the same basic tune, and I quite like the many tunes in the game that feature motifs from other games' soundtracks. The original Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Country, Mario 64, and the first Mario vs Donkey Kong game all get some of their music remade for this game, and they fit the vibes of the levels they used in well. I don't blame them for bringing back some spooky house themes, they're iconic. On the flop side though, the frequent use of music from older games means this game doesn't have much new music of its own, which is unfortunate. The music of Mario vs Donkey Kong 2 isn't bad, but it's very derivative. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to talk about the sound effects too. They're alright, I guess. The thwomps still roar like they did in the first game, which I like, though they do look more generic now. I like the punch sound the juggling ape toys make when a third Mini Mario approaches them. The buttons aren't anywhere near as satisfying as they were in the first game, but they're still fun to press, albeit in a different way, and the mechanical whirs these colourful things make as they extend and retract are nice. But where the satisfaction in this game's buttons is lacking, there are these pink square things around the levels you can remove and place in different parts. When you remove them, they make a nice noise, and when you place them, they make a nice pop 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 noise. 4 out of 6. A moderately positive score for a moderately good soundtrack. The music in this game is still very good, derivative though it may be. It's extremely catchy, it's been like stuck in my head for days as the music from this game, especially World 1, it's great. I really like the way that the songs in the levels are composed for this game. It starts off with a very simple melody with like just 1 or 2 instruments, and then as it goes, it builds up, gets more and more instruments as it goes each time around the melody. And it's really nice, it sounds great, it's great. I could maybe be convinced to give music a 5 out of 6, but yeah, most of its music is from other games really, so like that derivativeness has to hurt its score, I'm afraid. This time I've saved the most noteworthy part of the review for last. It's time to talk about the gameplay of Mario vs Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis. Blimey, I have so much to say about this game. Where do I even start? Well, let's put it this way. When I enter a new level in Mario vs Donkey Kong for GBA, most of the time I go, ooh. And almost every single level in March of the Minis, I go, ugh. The first Mario vs Donkey Kong was designed in such a way that I can, after giving the level a quick look, just jump in and play. Sometimes the level would be more about platforming, meaning you didn't need to think too much to succeed, and other times it would be more about solving a puzzle, which certainly requires more thought and planning, but most of the time you can still jump in and muddle through. The second Mario vs Donkey Kong, however, is designed in a way that discourages and punishes a just jump in mindset. The levels are much more complex and more difficult to navigate. Instead of just a single Mario to play as, you've now got 2 to like 8 Mini Marios to manage, all scattered about the level, and death lurks around every corner. Remember the levels from the first game where you guide 6 minis to the goal? Remember how I didn't like them because they were stressful? Well, in this game, every level is like that. Except the Mini Marios don't stay together and obediently follow an easily controlled Mario. Now, they're moving about all over the place and seem determined to die. What's more, controlling the minis with the touchscreen is really heckin' janky. My recent playthrough was rife with misinputs. The minis stopping instead of going down the pipe I wanted, not jumping when I tell them, etc. In this game, you always have a lot to manage between controlling each individual mini Mario and also manipulating the environment to keep them safe. At least this game allows you to retry or exit levels at no cost, and it doesn't seem that doing the level quickly factors in very much when it comes to getting a gold star rank. But then, speaking of gold star ranks, to get them in this game means you need to get the minis in a perfect chain, and it can be very difficult to get them all to the goal at the same time because of harsh level layouts, and often you'll need to have minis at the front wait so ones at the back can catch up and keep the chain going. But oh dear, the main thing that you can use to keep minis still so they can wait for the right time to act, the stop feature, is penalised by the game. You can't get a gold star if you stop any of the minis. So then you end up awkwardly making one or several minis go awkwardly back and forth in one little area, which requires near constant input, but you also need to guide the rest of the guys so they can join the ones at the front. So you have to juggle multiple groups, and if you take your eyes off anyone for more than a couple of seconds, they'll probably march merrily into their deaths while off screen. A big part of why I never bothered learning to drive is because my autistic mind really struggles with focusing on multiple things at once, especially if those things need to be done quickly and accurately. When driving, you need to be completely aware of your surroundings at all times. You need to be thinking 3-4 steps ahead. You need to keep your route in mind, keep all the rules you need to follow in mind, be aware of what all the surrounding vehicles and pedestrians are doing, predict accurately what they will do next, and be able to react if they don't follow the rules properly, all while piloting a complex vehicle capable of ending the lives of others or yourself if you failed in any way. It's far too much stimulus for my mind to juggle all at once. Such things stress me out immensely. Of course, playing Mario vs Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis is much lower stakes than driving a car, but having to balance controlling all the minis individually, manipulating the environment, and planning my next several moves all at the same time gives me a similar sort of stress. It's not bad when the whole level is on screen at once, but that's rare. It's also much better if the minis can just go through the level altogether, or better yet, if there was only one of them. Alas, levels don't really allow all the little guys to group up until the end of the level, and there aren't any solo Mini Mario levels. Almost as important to a game's enjoyability as how fun it is to play is how bad it feels when you lose. You can play the hardest game in the world, but if failure feels like no big deal, you feel like you can take on anything the levels throw at you and happily keep playing for hours. Celeste is a great example of this. No lives to lose, dying takes like 2 seconds, and each challenge is relegated to a series of fairly short screens, so progress always feels achievable. Thankfully, March of the Minis has no life system. You can try again and again with no penalty. Thank goodness for that, because if there were lives that you lost for every retry or level exit like in the first game, I'd be giving this game's gameplay a 1 or a 0 score. But despite this, the game is still complex and slow to progress in, and the minis die so easily. Every time I failed, I needed to walk away from the game to de-tilt. And if you ask me, if losing in a game makes you want to stop playing, you did something wrong in its design. In the review of the first game, I gave one boss fight a lot of grief because it felt like forever to do each failed attempt. I died several times in most levels of this game, but it felt like it took a long time to complete each failure. This whole game is like that one boss. But similar to the first game, March of the Minis does feature several different types of gameplay, so I'll do what I did last review and rank them all out of 10. I've already gone into how I feel about the main guide the minis to the door kind of level. Unsurprisingly, I'm not going to give it a good score, 2 out of 10. Occasionally there's a fun gimmick and occasionally things will line up in a satisfying way, but most of my experience with this kind of level consisted of fail a few times, then close the game.
Hey, come back here, you big monkey!
Mario called me a big monkey! Then return to it a while later after de-tilting and fail a couple more times before beating the level. This was my experience with about 80% of the levels, from as early on as World 2. Not fun. Eventually I decided to mostly give up on getting gold stars. My sanity is worth more to me than completion. If all the minis make it to the door alive, you're almost guaranteed a silver star. So that's what I strived for when playing. No Mini Mario left behind. Although I'd like to mention that getting a game over leads to a screen with a sleeping Mini Mario mumbling about various pastas and chocolate. The first game did this too. I think it's a fun game over screen, and I forgot to mention it in the review of the first game, probably because I was too good at it to get any game overs. Gold Mini Mario levels are this game's lazy excuse for a shake-up in the formula. They're exactly the same as normal levels, only now they're even more annoying to get a gold star on. 1 out of 10. I feel bad being this harsh, but this is how I feel. This game has bonus levels akin to the present minigames in the first one, but now they're only once per world, and since 1-ups don't exist anymore, they give you level kits to use in a construction zone. Honestly, smashing the mini Shy Guys is really fun and satisfying, and it's great that each world shakes up the layout of the pipes so each one feels different. It feels weird saying this, but I had way more fun playing the simple little minigames than the main campaign levels. 7 out of 10. Is that score beefed up by the fact that I wasn't having fun with most of this game, and this was a nice break from the main gameplay? Maybe. The DK boss fights in this game have you launching the mini Marios you've gathered throughout the world from a cannon in an attempt to hit the ape, / get stuff to fall on his head. And one of them brought the Bowerbird back, so this gets a 0 out of 10. Okay, just kidding. The controls of these fights are even more janky than in the main levels, but there's much less you need to juggle here and a bigger margin for error. It's more annoying to do these without losing any minis, so I just allowed myself to lose a few before retrying. These levels are kinda half fun and half jank, so I'll give them 5 out of 10. Then there's the other type of boss level, the final boss and the 2 basement levels. These are meant to be direct homages to levels from the original Donkey Kong for arcade, which is a really fun idea, and honestly this game executes it well. Also, hey look, it's the only thing Mario ever does in this game. He's been relegated to standing still and throwing a mini Mario at Donkey Kong occasionally. Remember how I said this game would be much less stressful if you only had one mini Mario to control? This is that! Well, mostly. If you take a little bit too long getting your mini up to the ladder, you are given a second one. But, joy of joys, that's not a problem because this sort of level has no points or ranking system. So you can stop them without consequence, or lose a few without consequence. It's so very freeing to just be able to play the game without having all the dumb high score chasing rules in the back of your mind. And remember when I said having the whole level on screen at once would make playing the game more manageable and enjoyable? This is that! Again, mostly. 2 out of 3 are slightly bigger than the screen, but it's still very manageable. If they somehow made the whole game like this, you'd be watching a much more positive review right now. These levels still have this game's core control scheme, which as you know I'm not too keen on, but they're definitely the best use of it. 8 out of 10. I should mention the construction zone before wrapping up, though it's impossible to rank user-generated content because it is as fun as you make it. As a kid, I had so much fun using this feature, and spent ages making levels in both this game and Miniland Mayhem. Nowadays, when I go into it though, I'm just drawing a blank. Nothing comes to mind. I used to be brimming with countless level creation ideas, but perhaps now I'm spent. I was the same way with Mario Maker 2. I wish I could show you the levels I made as a kid, but alas. As happens with many people's childhood games, I lost my original copy. I did have a mess around with it though, and as regards to what I can quantify here, the quality of the level creation software, I'd say this game is a bit lacking. It's probably not fair to complain about how you can only make up to 8 levels before you need to start erasing them to make more, because that's probably just a memory issue, even though that was definitely my biggest gripe with it as a kid. But it also has some pretty dumb restrictions, like certain objects are only available in certain themes, you can only move stuff if you switch to the mover tool, and there's a strict limit on how much stuff you can put in a level. It doesn't take much for the game to start saying no. As a level creator, it's needlessly restrictive. 3 out of 10. So, what score am I giving gameplay as a whole? There were a couple of things I gave high marks to, but the levels that comprise about 80% of the game, I find myself actively disliking. Overall, I'm afraid I'll have to give it a 2 out of 6. If the whole game was just the normal levels and the Gold Mini Mario levels, the gameplay would be getting a 1. But since we have the average quality DK fights and the above average Shy Guy Smash and last 3 DK fights, it raised it up 1 whole point. Every game has good parts and bad parts, good levels and bad levels. But when you don't enjoy the fundamentals of how a game plays, even the best made levels feel like a chore. I can't help but compare this game to Miniland Mayhem. the fourth game in the series that I also grew up playing. I remember that game being much better than this one because it did away with controlling the minis directly in favour of giving the player greater control over the environment. I used to think games 2 and 4 both had advantages and disadvantages, but now I look at 2 and see very little in the way of positives. I hope the fourth game holds up to how good I remember it being. I'd hate to go through the same realization I did here and lose the joy of another childhood favourite game. If 10-year-old George were writing this review, I'm certain he would have given it a much higher score, but unfortunately for you, you're stuck with grumpy old 26-year-old George, who thinks this game mostly sucks. 11 out of 24. Just barely under half of the best score possible. I kind of feel like the rating system that I've set up for this video has kind of failed me here, because even though this was kind of a predominantly negative review, the score ended up right next to average. I feel like this score should have been a few points lower than it is, and I really believe that is because gameplay is the biggest portion of the video game experience, of course. Music and story and visuals they're just the dressing of the salad. The gameplay is the real leaves of the experience. You can have a game where the visuals and story and audio are a bit naff or even bad, but if the gameplay is great, then you overall probably will have a good time with that game, and vice versa. This game is the vice versa, where everything else about it is either average or quite good, but the gameplay I mostly really disliked. I think in future reviews I might change the rating system so that gameplay counts for more of the total score. Keep everything else worth 6 points, but make gameplay worth 12 perhaps. But now that I'm already in the middle of this review series where I'm reviewing every game in one series, it would be very strange for me to change the rating system in the middle of it. So this game gets an 11.
I love this game.
I'm glad you love this game, Mario. And even though now I think much less of it than I once did, I'm glad I'll always have memories of enjoying it all those years ago. Next time I'll be reviewing the DSi exclusive Mario vs Donkey Kong The Minis March again. And because I've never played it before, that means it's got no expectations to live up to. And it can be as bad as it likes, and it won't make me sad. If you can't see me holding the game right now, it's because it was a digital exclusive. Doesn't make for as good a prop, does it?
Well, that was sure fun. I had a great time.